Do you want me to No. I'm lighting this for it. Oh, yeah. Okay. I am just on the side, but it won't be good to move it. So.
You can start.
So
There we go, you're right in the middle there, Kurt.
Cool.
Yeah.
If the video games were anything like the real life, no one would play them. And as we've said quite clearly in our case the whole time, video games are an outlet from the real life. People differentiate them from the real life. It's a separate place where you can go and kill aliens. And we don't think in this debate the proposition has proved that people see the link between real life and the games themselves. What I want to do before starting my speech is Louis tried to water down kind of what their team's onus was at the start. What we want to say is I listened very closely to Paul and at the start of his speech, and he framed it in the context saying that violent crime is increasing, violence in society is increasing in general, and he said our team's onus is to prove that video games lead to increased violence. So we'll accept that from first affirmative. We think that increased violence is the onus that they have. We think that huge onus has not stood in this debate. So what I'm going to be talking about in my speech today is firstly I'm going to be talking about this kind of incentive that the propositions tried to say of how it increases violence. They talked about how it kind of rewards killing in the games, therefore people translate that to real life. I'm going to be dealing with that point. Secondly, I'm going to be dealing with the issue of how it normalises violence in society and how people kind of get a perception that society is like that as well. And thirdly, I'm going to talk about the point how this was in 101, how it kind of teaches people to resolve conflicts in different ways because of what they learn in the game. And fourthly is that this was more of a criticism of video games in general, how people get worse social skills because they're locked up in their rooms away. That's more of a general sense. So firstly does it actually reward killing? And first thing what I want to do is this actually came up very late, and the reason I'm dealing with it first is because it kind of goes right back to the start of the point, and it came up very late in the proposition's first case. And they said, well hang on, no, we don't, video games, where people experience the real world, Louis said that it's like experimental learning. People don't see video games and real life as separate entities. It's kind of one big experience. And we say that is ridiculous, it's not true. Because people play video games and are people in the real life at completely different times. People play video games and are in real life in completely different contexts. And we say that you actually have to prove that there is a link between the two, rather than just saying you're getting one great big experience when it's obvious that both situations are completely different. What I would say is that in the game, killing, you might get rewarded for killing. And there's been a bit of a clash on how that works. What we've said is that the killing is kind of there to make you get the narrative. The narrative's not there just so you randomly kill someone for the sake of killing. Alec quite clearly explained how narratives work in video games. There is a strategy to accomplish some goal, and killing is a fun part of that. It's not the actual goal in itself. And hey, look, people get fun from that. We're not denying that, and then we think that's great. Not only that, what we said is that the key point is, does that link get transferred to real life? And we say no. And the reason we said this is, look, in the video games you get rewarded for killing, but in real life you do not. We say firstly, even kids are smart enough to know once they turn off the PlayStation, that doesn't happen outside. They know what's fake, they know what's on a TV screen. But furthermore, we say even if it did happen, that behaviour does not get reinforced in the real world. That behaviour does not get rewarded in the real world, and the constant an emphasis. Like video games, their whole case was on like, well, it gives like this kind of consistent reward for doing violence, right? So therefore, you know, they're going to go do it in real life. Well, once they go to real life, they don't get that reward, they don't get that emphasis. So we say that violence is not going to be there if the reward is what they want. Next, I want to talk about normalising and kind of like socialising. And this wasn't even well explained. What they said was, well, how people are going to see violence in video games, therefore that they think that the real world is going to be like this as well. We don't think that the link has been there. But also I'd say is that Hannah like brought this example like to as extreme as they could for the proposition's benefits. Like, look, go to The Sims, the game which is meant to be like the most realistic of them all, and even there, like, you can't build like rooms with no doors, so you can't kill people. Like, you know, they like build rooms and they take out the doors and then they die and stuff. But the thing is, right, is that like that's so out of touch with real life. Every single game is so ridiculously out of touch with real life that no one sees it as something which is in the real world. It's blatantly obvious 1 + 1 = 2, that there's like no, like it's nothing comparable to the real life at all. No one is dumb enough to think that it is. And also what we said, and this is what Alex said in his speech, is that the whole point, and look, the proposition didn't really understand the whole escapism point. What Alex said is that people escape real life to go get into video games. There wasn't an argument around, like, you know, the fun and kind of like detaching yourself from society and like going to that. We say that that doesn't happen. What we said was, the whole escapism point was highlighting the fact that people escape from the real life into the video game life. And so they're differentiating it because, well, you know, I might have had a bad day at school and real life was not that fun. Okay, now I'm going to take myself out of that and transform myself and become Bob in Gears of War, and I'm going to go shoot some aliens. And we say that what he was highlighting at that point was that people clearly can differentiate between the two, and that's how the whole outlet system works. Next, I want to talk about on how it teaches people to resolve conflict. And once again, from the proposition, there's no link, because it's like, well, hang on, all of a sudden people are going to start fighting over what they eat for breakfast. All of a sudden people are going to like fight over who gets the ice cream or who gets the next turn in the video game or whatever. And we say there's no link between that at all, because once again, that kind of behaviour is not reinforced at all in the real world, and people like, we don't, and secondly, we'd say is that shooting an alien does not like transfer at all to like resolving conflicts in the real world. We think that like it's so not comparable that it just doesn't work. Lastly, I want to talk about social skills problems. This happens, this is not like, I just want to say that like even non-violent video games, like people can play a lot and get addicted to as well. So this is more of like a general anti-video game point. But what we want to say is that firstly, kids, we don't think that it's good enough to say, well, some kids lock themselves in rooms for like 8 hours a day and play video games. We think that there's still such things as school. We think friends still exist as well. And we think perfectly people get enough social skills as it is out in the real world. But secondly, we say, look, if you have a small minority who are using video games too much and maybe like consuming it quite a lot in the day, we think that's like a parental issue, right, for them to deal with. And there's a lot of cases where if like there's a small minority of things that misuse certain like goods or services, that's not to say that on the whole society, you know, is detrimental for it. We say that you actually got to prove that there's some wider societal thing. We say that, look, at the end of the day, what this debate comes down to is, can they prove whether violence increases due to video games? We say, look, the link is not there. The reward for killing in the video games does not transfer into real life. People don't think that video games, the normal violence there, they don't think that that's normal in real life. People don't learn how to like treat and resolve conflicts from what their video games are because they're so different. And for those reasons, violence isn't increased. Empirically, we don't see it at all. And we think the proposition's case is just a load of nonsense.
Okay, let's walk into the link. You guys can do your adjudication by yourselves. And then walk back, or don't do it. You don't do it together. You